They told me he died when I was a baby. No grave, no photos, just a closed chapter one was never allowed to open. Then one day, a letter arrived. From his other daughter. She called me sister. And what she revealed shattered every lie I was raised on. Turns out, my dad wasn't dead. He was erased. And someone in my family made sure of it. My name's Emma, and for most of my life, I thought I was the product of a one-night stand gone wrong. My mom raised me alone, bitter, defensive, always dodging questions about my father. He's dead, she'd say. End of story. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We weren't rich, but I worked hard, got into college on scholarship, built my life around the idea that I was alone, and that was okay. Until my 26th birthday. That's when I got a letter postmarked from Houston. No return name. Just a message. I think we share a father. I'm your sister, and I need to talk. Back then, I had no idea where this would lead. But if you stick around till the end, you'll understand why I don't forgive lies. Especially not the ones that cost someone their whole identity. And hey, maybe you'll want to send this to someone who needs a reminder. Truth always finds a way. I got the letter on a Thursday. It was jammed in with the usual stack of bills and grocery ads, but the handwriting stood out. Loopy cursive on a cream envelope, addressed to Emma Lang. I blinked at that. I haven't used that last name since I was 10. Technically, I go by my mom's now. Harris, ever since she told me my real father died before I was old enough to remember him. I almost tossed it in the trash. But something made me stop. Inside was a single folded page. No return address. No greeting. Just one line that punched through my gut like ice. I think we share a father. I'm your sister. Please call me. And beneath that, a phone number with a Houston area code. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at it like it might catch fire. A sister? I didn't have siblings. My mom never remarried, never dated anyone for more than 5 minutes. And my father, well, according to her, he was dead. End of story. I waited until midnight. I couldn't sleep anyway. I texted the number. Simple. Who are you? The reply came 2 minutes later. My name is Lena. My dad was David Lang. Born 1968, died 2021. He said he had another daughter named Emma. I froze. David Lang. That name stirred something. Old, faint, like a voice I wasn't supposed to remember. I raced upstairs and dug through my closet, pulling down a dusty plastic bin I hadn't opened in years. Inside were old school photos, drawings, some half-torn cards. And at the bottom, a photo I'd seen once before but never questioned, my mom, in her 20s, with a tall man in a white t-shirt. He had soft eyes, arms wrapped around her. On the back, me and D, spring 97. D. David? I zoomed in with my phone, held the screen next to a picture Lena sent. Her and a man at a birthday party, blowing out candles. The same soft eyes, the same smile. That man wasn't dead in the 90s. That photo was dated 2019. I confronted my mom the next day, sat her down at her kitchen table, and laid out the photo and the letter like it was evidence in a murder trial. She didn't blink. He was a liar, she said flatly. Forget about it. Mom, he wasn't dead. You told me he died. She stood up, dumped her coffee, and muttered something about old wounds and protecting you. I stared at her, my entire childhood unraveling in reverse. She wouldn't look at me, wouldn't explain, just shut down. So I did the only thing I could think of. I booked a flight to Houston. Because if there was even a chance I had a sister, a real family, I was going to find out the truth. And something told me, my mom was hiding a hell of a lot more than just a name. Houston felt hot and wrong the second I stepped off the plane. Not wrong like danger. Wrong like this should have happened 20 years ago. Lena picked me up in an old Honda Civic. She looked like someone I might have gone to college with. Jeans, messy bun, no makeup. But her eyes stopped me cold. Same color as mine. Same shape, even. We both noticed. You look like him, she said quietly. Around the eyes. I didn't know what to say to that. What do you say to a stranger who calls you sister? We went to a quiet diner near her place. I couldn't eat. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Photos, she said. Letters. Stuff he kept. He tried finding you. Inside were a dozen snapshots of a man I didn't recognize, but somehow knew. Hiking in Arizona. Grilling at a backyard party. Holding a baby, Lena, with his eyes full of light. And one letter, addressed to me. I found that after he passed, she said. It was in a box marked Emma, in case. He died in 2021. Pancreatic cancer. I looked up, feeling the weight of that letter like it had time traveled straight into my chest. He was alive? I whispered. All this time. She nodded. He never stopped looking. Said your mom just disappeared with you. He hired a PI once. Got nowhere. I felt like vomiting. 26 years of silence. Not because he didn't care, but because she blocked him. My mom. The person I trusted most had burned the bridge before I could even crawl across it. Lena leaned forward. Emma, I'm not saying this to hurt you, but you should know. He left a will. He named you. That stopped me. Wait. What? She pulled out a copy. David Lang's last will and testament. Right there, in clean type. To my daughter, Emma Lang, whom I have not seen since infancy, I leave. My hands shook. But how? I stammered. Why didn't I? Lena's face darkened. The estate lawyer said someone showed up after he passed. A woman. She claimed you died as a baby. She even showed a death certificate. I dropped the folder. No. No way. That was crazy. Illegal. Insane. But it sounded exactly like the kind of scorched earth move my mother would make. She stole my identity, I said slowly, to erase him from my life. And then she stole from his life too. Lena hesitated. The lawyer. He didn't know any better. He crossed your name off. Distributed the estate. I stared down at the will, at the black letters that should have changed everything, but instead had been buried like my father's memory. I wasn't just angry. I was grieving a second time. And beneath that grief, something sharp was starting to stir. I need to make this right. The lawyer's office was tucked into a bland strip mall outside Austin, not exactly the high-powered legal arena I'd imagined. His name was Don Whitaker, mid-60s, disheveled in a nice suit kind of way. He looked startled when I introduced myself. Emma Lang? He said, blinking like I'd risen from the grave. That can't be right. I dropped the will onto his desk. It is. That's my name. And that's my father. He sat down slowly, lips tightening. I was told you died in infancy. There was a certificate. I stared him down. Do you have a copy? He rummaged through a drawer and pulled out a thin folder. Inside was a death certificate with my name on it. Dated 1999. Cause of death, sudden infant death syndrome. I felt cold. My throat went dry. That's a forgery, I said flatly. I was 9 in 1999. He winced. I suspected something didn't add up, but your mother was very convincing. She said she wanted to make sure David's affairs were handled without reopening old wounds. I nearly laughed. Old wounds. She'd carved them herself. She stole my father's last gift to me. She stole me from him. And you just took her word for it. Don raised his hands. I know. I made a mistake. A serious one. But it's not irreversible. He leaned forward. If we reopen the estate, we can challenge the legitimacy of the death certificate. But it's going to be complicated. I don't care if it's complicated, I said. I want my name back. He nodded. And there's more. Your father set up a separate trust. Education, housing, personal development. Half was meant for Lena. The other half was yours. My stomach flipped. How much? Roughly $187,000. It was liquidated after your supposed death. I already knew where it went. The overpriced renovations in my mom's kitchen. The sudden new car when I started college. The emergency dental surgery she never explained. It all made sense now. I wasn't just a daughter she manipulated. I was a check she cashed. Don's tone softened. I'll help you. But if we go forward, you need to know, this could go public. Fraud this big? It doesn't just disappear. I stood up. Good, I said. Let it go public. She deserves it. As I left his office, I called Lena and told her everything. She was silent for a long time, then whispered, we'll help. Anything you need. I hung up and stood in the parking lot, heart pounding. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a crime. My mother faked my death. She robbed me, and she robbed my father of closure, of knowing his daughter didn't vanish. But I wasn't gone. And now that I knew the truth, I wasn't staying silent. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I checked into a cheap motel near the outskirts of town, opened my laptop, and started digging. If my mother had faked my death, there had to be more. More lies. More paper trails. More cracks in her perfect little narrative. I started with public records, birth certificate, school registrations, medical visits. All showed I'd been alive and well long after 1999. No name change, no adoption. I still existed in every system except the one that counted most, my father's life. Then I filed a Freedom of Information request in the county where my parents used to live, where I was born. I asked for everything related to David Lang and Miranda Harris between 1996 and 2000. It took hours, but finally there it was. 2 police reports, both filed by my mother. One accused David of harassment. The second was a restraining order request, denied by a judge for lack of credible threat. I read every word. She claimed he was unstable, obsessive, emotionally erratic. But the judge had written, no physical evidence, no pattern of violence, allegations unsupported. Translation? My mom lied, and the court saw through it. But David still lost me. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My mom hadn't just burned the bridge between us. She built a moat of lies and filled it with legal landmines. I needed air. I drove to the cemetery Lena had told me about, where David was buried. It was a small plot, surrounded by oaks. No statue, just a clean marble headstone. David Allen Lang, 1968 to 2021. Still searching. That inscription shattered me. I dropped to my knees and whispered, I'm here. No one else was around, so I spoke freely. Told him everything. About the letter, the lie, the will. How I wished I could remember his voice. How I hated that he died thinking I didn't want him. And I made a promise. I'll clear your name. And mine. I don't care how long it takes. When I got back to the motel, I opened the manila envelope Lena had given me again. Inside was one letter I hadn't read. The handwriting was shaky, the ink slightly smudged. Emma, I don't know if this will ever reach you. But if it does, please know, I never gave up. I loved you from the moment I held you. I hope one day you'll find your way back to me. Love, Dad. The letter was dated 2005. I was 6 years old. That meant my mom kept it, hid it, and never told me. That was the last straw. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intentional, calculated, and now it was going to be public. I didn't call ahead. I drove straight to my mom's house the next morning, parked in the same driveway I used to rollerblade on, and knocked until she opened the door. She blinked at me like I was some solicitor selling solar panels. Emma, you're back early. I stepped inside without asking. We need to talk. She shut the door slowly. If this is about that girl. Her name is Lena. I snapped. She's my sister. And this, I pulled out the copy of the will, the photo of David, and the forged death certificate, is everything you tried to hide from me. She didn't look surprised. Not a gasp. Not a tremble. Just that same cold, detached tone I remembered from every childhood argument where I wasn't allowed to cry. David was a mistake, she said. You were the only good thing that came from that relationship. I wasn't going to let him poison you too. Poison me? I scoffed. He wrote me letters. He searched for me. And you? You told the world I was dead just to steal what he left for me. Her lips twitched. I did what I had to do. Did you, Mom? Did you have to lie to a court? Forge documents? Bury his legacy like it was trash? Now she got defensive. I was protecting you. You think I enjoyed raising a kid alone? You think I didn't want help? He walked away. No, I said. He was pushed. You isolated me from him. Then you profited off the lie. She turned her back to me and started pacing the kitchen, like she could walk away from the truth. You're being dramatic. I'm being robbed. I yelled. Of a father. A family. $187,000 in inheritance. And you think I'm overreacting? She turned on me then, eyes flashing. You owe me everything. I sacrificed everything for you. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the kind of twisted logic that made my blood boil. No, you sacrificed me to get what you wanted. Control, pity, money. Her face went blank again, like flipping a switch. I suppose you're going to sue me now? I stared at her for a long second. I already hired a lawyer. We're reopening the estate. And we're pressing charges for fraud. She let out a low laugh, short, sharp, bitter. You wouldn't dare. I leaned forward, voice ice cold. Watch me. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. She just stood there, arms folded, like she'd rather die than admit she lost. As I walked out, I looked around the house one last time. The kitchen she remodeled with stolen money. The living room she built on lies. And the mother I thought I knew? Gone. What stood in her place was someone I no longer recognized, and no longer feared. The next week was a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and legal jargon. Don Whitaker, the estate lawyer, looped in a fraud attorney named Carla Ruiz, sharp, calm, the kind of woman who doesn't blink when you drop the phrase, faked death certificate. We're going to need to build this piece by piece, she told me over coffee. Document everything. Timeline, financial records, birth and death certificates, school enrollments. We need a bulletproof case. I already had a digital folder labeled Lies Uncovered. It was growing by the hour. They found more. Turns out, my mom had opened a special custodial account under my name in 2001, then liquidated it in 2011, right after David's will was executed. The funds were transferred to a personal account and used to pay off a second mortgage. We even found receipts for a cruise. A week-long vacation to Cabo she took with her church friend, paid with the ashes of my father's final gift. That's when Carla leaned across the desk and said, "This isn't just estate fraud. We can press for theft, falsification of public records, and obstruction." Good. Because I wasn't interested in a settlement. I wanted a public record. A stain. Something she couldn't scrub clean with a smile and a sympathy story. Meanwhile, Lena was working her own angle. She had a friend in local news. A soft-spoken producer who loved whistleblower stories. We gave her the whole thing, with evidence. The headline dropped a week later. Woman fakes daughter's death to inherit estranged ex's estate. The article exploded on social media. People couldn't believe it. Or they could, and they were furious. There were hundreds of comments. Reminds me of my mom. My aunt did this to her son. Hope she gets jail. I read every one. That same night, a man from the Travis County DA's office called. Said they were opening an official investigation into Miranda Harris. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just closed my eyes, breathed in, and whispered, "It's starting." My mom, of course, went silent. No calls. No texts. She even blocked me on Facebook, like that would stop the avalanche headed her way. I started getting messages from distant relatives, people I barely knew, asking, "Is it true?" And I told them. Every word. I have the court date to prove it. Some apologized. Some didn't. Didn't matter. Because the truth was no longer buried in a closet or sealed in a letter. It was everywhere. I wasn't just fighting for money. Or for legacy. I was fighting for reality, for the right to own my own life. And for the first time, people were listening. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold coffee, and I hated how familiar it felt. I'd been there once before, for a parking dispute. This wasn't that. This was State versus Miranda Harris. Fraud. Forgery. Identity falsification. Theft by deception. For charges, each carrying weight. Each one personal. She sat at the defendant's table like a queen in exile. Hair done. Conservative blouse. Not a flicker of remorse. I was called to testify first. Carla had prepped me for weeks. Stay calm. Speak clearly. Don't take the bait. But when I stepped up to the stand and looked my mother in the eyes, the words felt like glass in my throat. She told me my father was dead. I said. Since I was 4. She never showed me pictures, never answered questions. Just he's gone. That was it. And when did you find out he wasn't? The prosecutor asked. On my 26th birthday. A letter. From my half-sister. I laid out the whole story. The will. The forged death certificate. The stolen inheritance. The letters. The photos. The truth. I held nothing back. The defense attorney tried to spin it. She was protecting her daughter. She acted out of fear. She believed it was the right thing. But then Lena testified. She cried on the stand when she talked about watching our dad slowly die, still hoping he'd find me, still believing that maybe, somehow, the court had made a mistake. He wrote letters to Emma Lang until the last month of his life. Letters my mom made sure I'd never see. Then Don Whitaker, the estate lawyer, testified. He admitted he'd been duped. That my mother brought him a death certificate that looked real enough for him to close the case. That he never once checked school records or hospital files. But the biggest blow came when Carla submitted the original custodial account records. My name, my social security number, the withdrawals, the spending, the vacations. My mom flinched for the first time. Her attorney asked to pause the session. She looked pale, but it was too late. The prosecution closed with a line I'll never forget. Miranda Harris didn't just lie. She stole a daughter's identity, a father's legacy, and 20 years of truth. She faked a death and lived off the corpse. The room went silent. Even the bailiff looked shaken. When we stepped outside for recess, people were whispering. She faked her own kid's death? She deserves prison. She doesn't even look sorry. I sat on a bench and stared at the sky. This was the part of the story where the villain started to realize the script had flipped, and she wasn't the narrator anymore. The jury took less than 4 hours. I spent most of that time pacing outside the courthouse with Lena, sipping bad coffee, and pretending I wasn't rehearsing 100 ways this could go wrong. But when we were called back in, and the foreperson stood up, I swear time slowed. On the count of fraud, guilty. On the count of forgery, guilty. On the count of falsifying official documents, guilty. On the count of theft by deception, guilty. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't overwhelmed, but because I'd already cried all those tears years ago. I just didn't know what I was crying for back then. My mother sat motionless, like her body was present, but her mind had gone somewhere she couldn't be touched. No tears, no apology, just empty denial. The judge gave her 2 years probation, community service, and a permanent mark on her record. Part of me wanted more, wanted prison, disgrace, a media circus. But the bigger part knew. Her sentence had already started. Everyone knew what she'd done. She'd be remembered for it. Whispers in the grocery store. Doors quietly closing. No more sympathy cards. No more trust. Meanwhile, my name was restored. Dawn refiled the paperwork. I was officially reinstated as David Lang's daughter. I signed the estate documents myself. No proxy, no substitute. The trust was reinstated too. I received the $187,000 I was owed. Every penny tracked, every theft reversed. It wasn't just money. It was proof. It was real. But I didn't use it for revenge. I used part of it to set up a scholarship under my dad's name, for kids separated from their parents by lies, addiction, incarceration. I called it the Second Letter Fund, named after the unopened note my mom had hidden away for years. Lena helped me launch it. Dawn helped me file it as a nonprofit. Carla donated the first $100. 1 month later, at a high school awards night in Austin, a teenage girl hugged me after receiving the first scholarship. She whispered, "I found my dad because of your story." That nearly broke me. I wasn't just healing myself anymore. I was starting to heal others. I walked to David's grave that weekend, knelt down beside the stone, and traced the words with my fingers. Still searching. "Not anymore," I said. "They know now, Dad. They all know." And for the first time in my life, I felt whole. Not because someone else finally gave me closure, but because I tore the truth out of the dark and made it impossible to ignore. I kept it sealed for weeks. The letter my dad had written me, the one from 2005, marked in case. I carried it around like a relic, afraid that opening it would somehow make it real. Final. No more mystery. Just words from a man I'd never get to meet. But I knew where it belonged. So I drove back to the cemetery, same rental car, same black hoodie. It was drizzling that day, a soft, useless kind of rain that felt more like fog. David's grave was clean. Someone, maybe Lena, had left fresh flowers. I sat cross-legged on the damp grass and pulled the envelope from my coat pocket. No return address. Just Emma, in that shaky handwriting I now recognized from dozens of birthday cards he'd never sent. From the will. From court documents. I didn't open it. Not this one. Instead, I took out a pen and notebook and wrote my own. "Dad, I don't know what your letter says. I don't need to. Because I know now, I was never abandoned. I was hidden. You didn't forget me. You searched. You wrote. You loved me. I wish we'd had more time. I wish I remembered your voice, your laugh, your stories. But I remember this now. I wasn't unloved. I was stolen. And I got myself back. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when the world tried to erase me. I found you. I found Lena. And I found the truth. Love always. Emma." I folded my note and slid it under the plastic flower vase, right next to the unopened letter he left me. We'd never get to talk. But now we'd spoken. As I walked away, I didn't feel empty. I felt seen. Real. Named. The kind of peace I thought only existed in stories other people got to have. But this was my story now. And I had one more chapter to write. My mother hasn't spoken to me since the trial. No calls. No letters. Just silence. Not the heavy, regretful kind. The stubborn, frozen kind. The kind that says, "I'll die before I say sorry." And honestly, that's fine. I used to ache for her approval. I used to bend my own spine trying to be the daughter she wanted, quiet, grateful, forgetful. But not anymore. Now I'm just me. Emma Lang. Not Emma Harris. Not the girl with no dad. Not the daughter of a woman who lied so long she started to believe it herself. I don't need permission to exist. I kept the houseplant my mom gave me in college. One of those spider plants you're supposed to water once a week. I used to joke that it was her way of saying, This is how much I trust you. It died last month. I didn't replace it. Some things aren't worth reviving. I moved to Austin. Lena lives 10 minutes away. We meet up on Thursdays for tacos and bad TV. She still calls me kiddo, even though she's only 4 years older. And every now and then, when we get quiet, she'll look at me and say, "You know he would have been proud, right?" And I do. Not because of the money, or the scholarship, or the court case, but because I didn't let the lie win. I took every broken piece my mother left behind and built something new. A name, a story, a truth too solid to bury. And her? She lives in the same house, drives the same car, stares at the same kitchen tiles paid for with someone else's legacy. But now, when people ask her about me, she has to choose silence or shame. That's a sentence no court could have written better. As for me, I sleep just fine.